This video is a replay of a trade I took today. Now, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I am not a financial advisor, and trading entails risk. Just because I got these results today doesn't mean that I can get these every day, nor that you can. Remember, the entire premise of the investing project and the $1 million experiment is that I am not an expert, and yet I am learning how to do this. So for heaven's sake, don't just blindly copy me. Instead, find a mentor, someone who is an expert, and join their community. Pay for their mentorship. This approach has worked very well for me, and it likely will for you too. So use this video partly as education and partly as inspiration. After all, if I can learn this, you can too. Hey y'all, another kind of messy day today. One thing I did manage to do is catch a short on the NQ, and as you can see here, it's been again been pretty messy in this whole area, but I did manage to see. Now I didn't quite trust the 5 minute bars for the short entry. What I ended up doing is looking over at the 15 minute. Even the 15 minute, if you look earlier, it wasn't all that trustworthy. There was still an opportunity to get whipsawed out of this thing. However, there was a pullback here at the at around 7:15 bar, 7:15 7:30. Is that right? When did I get into this thing? The 7 o'clock to 7:15 bar. There was a pull. And then I ended up putting this trade on because I saw the pull on the 15, and it was the pull on the 5, of course, and it extended a little bit further. So I was late to the 15. I was certainly late if I was looking at the 5, but nevertheless, I put that on here, and I'm going to let this go ahead and play. Uh, I only traded one contract here because the risk was pretty substantial, and after 50 points in the right direction, it pulled it to even. What I ended up doing though, because with the shorts, I kind of thought it was going to get bought back up fairly quickly, so I was pretty eager to trail the stop, and I did trail my stop right down. I ended up taking a profit at 100 points, or I made it stop me out after it bounced back after 100 points. So I ended up with a $200 win on this particular trade. However, I'm just going to let this actually run because if I had left it alone, which as a matter in point of interest has failed me in the last week and a half or so. But nevertheless, in this instance, if I'd left it alone, it would have eventually. It was trailing at the 70 points behind the lowest point. It would have actually triggered my target at 200, and it didn't go much beyond that. So I had 200 points, $400 available for the asking. I didn't get it because I took the profit at 100 points for $200. It's still a win. However, it could have been a bigger win. Anyway, I mentioned that because that was the one bright spot of the day. What I was doing now, if you look at the time here, it's about 7:34. What I was looking to do here was buy the bounce because I was quite convinced that there was going to be a bounce. That bounce hasn't arrived yet, and I'm going to let this play a little bit, and I'll show you what I was thinking because I ended up taking the bounce in the MYM, which is maybe not the ideal place to take it. No, no, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. I looked for the M2K. That was this beast down here. I actually took a long on the M2K, and I took it at 734, which is right about here. So I ended up putting this buy in right about here, if I remember correctly, and I was at 3018.9. So maybe I'm already 3018.9. Come down here. Oh, come on now. Let's just behave. 3018.9. Good. So that's where I ended up getting in. Unfortunately for me, this ended up being a loss. But I'll get into this trade in any event, and we'll have a look at it. It ended up just poking its head above, just enough to pull me into it. And I ended up taking a loss for the full 100 points here. Let's see, is that correct? Yeah, 734. So let's let this go ahead. It ended up coming down here, taking me out. You can see on the 2 minute chart, there was a certain amount of basing going on here, but then it wasn't done with the sell-off. And if you look up here, meanwhile, the NQ and the ES, they're still selling off. This was just me getting in too soon. As it turns out, getting into the M2K a little bit later would have been fine. In this instance, it just wasn't done yet. So it sold off. Give it a second. It'll stop me out here. And what I would say here is, it toys with me first, of course, making me think there's hope, but in reality, there's no hope. So anyway, it takes me out for the $300 loss. So I'm now net down 100. What I ended up doing at this point, let's just put me out of my misery here, would you? Hurry it up. Let's speed this up. Let's get this execution out of the way here. Oh, come on now. There we go. In real time, this is quite agonizing. Okay, so now we're out, and I'm pausing this for a second. What, actually, let it go for a minute. What I normally do here, what I try to train myself to do is, if I get stopped out on the 5 minute, I try not to get back in on a 5 minute. I try to graduate up one time frame to the 15 minute and say, all right, I'll get back in now when I see a setup on the 15. And, and so what I ended up doing was I got a setup on the 15, but I took the setup on the 15 on the YM, not on the Russell. Now, there's a reason why I mention this as significant, and that is that, well, I'll show you in a second here. Just let me concentrate on this for a second, figure out where did I get in on this? I got in at 8 o'clock, so right about now. So here, what I ended up actually doing was putting a trade in here at 52,150 is where I got into this beast. What I didn't do was get into the trade down here on the Russell. So what's interesting about this is, you know, it doesn't have to be the case that if I stop out on the Russell, I need to get back in on the Russell. That's a bit pedantic, but nevertheless, I mentioned this because it would have been a better trade to get back in on the Russell. What I did is I got in on the YM. So let's go ahead and let this play. And we'll see that neither of them, I mean, they both respond a little bit. Neither of them come anywhere near their targets. So it's maybe a little bit of a moot point. We see some positive movement, but the Russell, as you can see, has stretched more than the YM. Now, I kind of thought, well, there's two ways to think about this. One is the YM was stronger anyway. Oh, by the way, with the YM, I only gave it 90 points of room, which, as it turns out, was right below this. And so it was lucky that it didn't stop me out earlier. Anyway, I only gave it 90 points of room. The Russell had a little bit more risk required. It was down here a little bit further, so like 120 ticks or thereabouts. But it had more opportunity to rebound. And you can see already that the Russell's spending more time in profitable territory than the YM for a similar amount of risk. A little bit more, but similar amount. The YM spends a whole bunch of time flagging in this area, which is not surprising when you look at the ES. It's spending all this time trying to figure out what it's about as well. But in the meantime, we're solidly 50 ticks into the profit with the 2K, with the Russell. Would have been better to have gotten back into that one. And at some point along the way, I end up having to cut my losses. So with the YM, it spent so much time down here. At some point, the ES finally gets its act together and makes its way a bit higher, and this follows suit. And this is when I said, okay, I'm now not taking any more chances. Once it actually starts to curl upwards, I've moved my stop to even, and it ended up taking me out. So I ended up with nothing. But if I actually look at this and say, well, if I were going to call it, and pick a time to call it. So we already see that the Russell, that the ES is starting to curl upwards. This is the move. I ended up moving this to even. It was probably a little bit higher than this before I moved it to even. But if I were to just say, all right, stop, get out, see where we are. Well, this is 22 ticks into profit. This is 71 ticks into profit. I would have done substantially better to just get out. Now, at the end of the day, I ended up with nothing in this, and I was down 100 net because of that 300 loss offsetting the 200 gain. But I'll go ahead and place that in there just for fun. And let's just see when I end up getting stopped out at 0. Let's see where the Russell actually was. All right, so I'm stopped out at 0. If I just closed this at this point, I would have had 55 points. That's let's call that 300 points ish on 6 contracts. That's $150 at 50 cents a contract. I would have had at least 150 to gain. I would have been net positive $50 for the day if I had done that. Of course, I didn't do that. I ended up down net 100 for the day. Oh well, such is life. This has been a messy set of sessions for the last number of days. No really great A plus setups, not even B plus setups. These are just sort of, I'm trying to invent trades where I see them, and it's not been great. That NQ short was pretty good, but that could have gone. I mean, that was iffy. I didn't know it was going to sell off that much. I was actually kind of surprised that it did. Anyway, there we are.